Right. Well, let us begin. Okay. Anybody remember what we're up to? That's what I'm asking. Anybody remember?
I have an excuse.
Oh, let's hear it. I'm ready for the lousy excuse.
I know I'm not right. I'm on 183.
No guesses even? Wow, usually we have some people throwing out some random guesses. Dr. Krako's here. We know we're going to get a random guess on the page now. Go ahead, Doc. What's your lucky numbers today? No? Nothing.
What's my what?
Your lucky numbers for the guess and what page we're up to. You usually like to guess.
Should be, let's see, 180, 185 still?
185?
I think we're around about 86, 85.
Or is it 187?
187.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Somewhere between 185 and 187. Are we allowed to give ranges?
You're allowed to give ranges, yeah, sure. Anywhere from 0 to 1,000. Absolutely. Okay.
185, 187 is my guess.
Okay. All right.
That was an educated guess.
That was an educated guess, meaning that's where you left your marker?
He put his full soul in it. I think that's where we're at. I think that's about where we're at.
354. All right, so let's get started here.
185 or where?
We'll start from Gimel.
Okay, 180. Yeah.
Actually, the arrow is at the top of 186.
Which is Dalet. Yeah, we did Gimel. But let's recap Gimel. Okay. All right, so what we mentioned previously was that the neshama, or really more accurately the nefesh, is made up primarily of two parts. There's the upper and the lower. And the lower part is what connects to the physical type of nefesh, meaning the nefesh that is consistent throughout all of the animal kingdom as well. And that connection is then made to the actual physical properties of the person or animal through the blood. So that was the basic premise that he started with over here. But as he explained, the nefesh works in stages. It's got different parts, and the higher parts are more spiritual, and they can't connect to the physical. It's only the lowest part that's able to connect to the lower physical world. Okay, that's the basic premise of what we have been discussing. Okay. So now, let's see Gimel again. V'hinei. Mipnei hakesher hazeh, because of this connection, sheniksheres nefesh zayis beguf, that this nefesh is connected to the body, ayidei nefesh atachtena, through the lower nefesh, as we just explained. Nimtzes mugbeles begvulos pratim. So that means that the nefesh is going to have limitations. It's going to have boundaries. There are going to be specific areas in which it will be confined to. And v'nimna mimena hahishtatzvus v'ha'esek im hanimtzah meruchnim v'nivdal. And because of these boundaries, these limitations that the nefesh is subjected to because of its connection to the physical, it is limited in its ability, if not entirely, unable to connect with the spiritual. So as things are more spiritual, they become less accessible, basically, to the physical person and the nefesh contained therein. Now this is true, this is true so long as the nefesh is still connected to the body. Dahainu kol yemei chayei ha'adam, referring to the lifetime of a person. So, as long as a person is alive, his nefesh is confined to his body, and that confinement limits its ability to connect with the divine. Okay. Umispa'eles mima'aseh haguf lihiskasher al yadam ba'er habayis baruch shemai. The effects that a person will have upon their nefesh is based on their actions. So as a person does things, that will affect the nefesh. And we learned about this. This was the primary discussion that we had last week. And through the things that we do, the nefesh is affected. In meaning, as he explained, hiskasher al yadam ba'ar baris shmai, either to connect to Hashem's light. Through our actions, our neshamas become more connected to that light. Okay. Or, unfortunately, sometimes we make decisions that turn us away from Hashem's light, and they connect us instead to the forces of the hiddenness, the lack of Hashem's light, the forces of tumah, of impurity, and of evil. Uvizeh talui hi kainana l'shleimus sam'uta hisrach kamimena. And it is in this, that the ability of the nefesh, or its suitability, I guess is a better word, of the nefesh for the future, for the time when it needs to connect to Hashem, that is connected entirely to the things that we do here. So the way we develop our nefesh here in this world is what's going to determine its suitability to connect to Hashem in the world to come. So the more good things we do, the more suitable our neshamas will become, and that way, for eternity, we'll be in a better place. The more things we do to the contrary that work against us, those are the things that are going to remove us from that ability in the future. So everything we do here is going to have a lasting impact for eternity. So keep that in mind. No pressure. Okay, good. Tshuva, yeah, tshuva is definitely not something you want to bank on, though. You don't be one of those. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Sorry.
Someone needed their Starbucks. All right. Okay, that's fine. No judging.
That sounded like judging.
Yeah, it did.
That sounded exactly.
That's why I had to say no judging.
It's like no offense, but
Yeah.
Right.
Then what you're about
Exactly.
to say is offensive. No offense.
Lynn, it's so nice to see you back. How are you?
So-
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't even recognize you. I'm kidding.
I took a shower.
Okay. Glad we got that out of the way. All right.
Percolating.
Yeah, oh no. All right. So, as we said, and don't worry, those of you who are just coming now, we're just reviewing. That was on purpose.
You established a page or page?
No, we're still working on that.
184.
184. Okay. Now, then we said the flip side. The flip side of this conversation is Vihi pa'eles ba'adam, that the nefesh actually is able to act upon a person. Umanhages as a nefesh atachtaina, and it's able to guide the lower nefesh. Umadrichasa, and it's able to also like guiding. It's another basically the same word. Leading, I guess maybe is another word.
Angus is leading them.
Right. And it is able to inscribe the forms, the images of our intellect based on what we are able to handle, what we are prepared for. So this, we said, basically means that the ideas that come to us emotionally or logically, these are things that come potentially from the higher level of our nefesh. So it's not just a one-way street. It's not just that the things that we do affect our nefesh, but also the other way around. The nefesh can affect us, and that it guides us. And you'll find that people who work on themselves and try very hard to do what is good, those are people who will continually be doing what's good and be driven to do what's good. Now, everybody has a Yetzer Hara, so there's always that temptation to do what's wrong. But the more we accustom ourselves to doing good things, the easier it becomes. And the more natural it becomes, because what we're doing essentially is feeding our nefesh, and our nefesh is now much more sturdy and solid on the spiritual side, and therefore it has more of an effect on us to continue us along that path. And you'll find that the Gemara talks about how, people sometimes are they automatically, instinctively walk in certain directions towards mitzvahs, because that's just what they do. That's where they are. I remember it's a mindset, but it's more than that. It's not just a mindset. It's also the fact that the more we nurture our spiritual side, the more impactful it will be on our lives. And we will find things becoming second nature. We will find it easier to do the right things the more we do them, because the nefesh is becoming more and more powerful and is able to hold more sway over us in our decisions that we make, both consciously and unconsciously, or subconsciously.
I like Perkei Avos mitzvah, Geras mitzvah, kind of that concept.
It's definitely the concept of mitzvah geras mitzvah, that one mitzvah leads to another, is definitely related to that. Yes.
That's from the other side, right? That's from the mitzvah side, more than your attitude.
It's everything. It's all part of that same concept. It all works together. In other words, every time you do something, it builds on itself, both from the action making you more accustomed to it, and your mindset, and your spiritual. Right? All those, they all work together. So it's always up or down. Okay, so that's what that was that. And it will create the thoughts and the will, the desire for the different things that we find ourselves wanting, based on the directions that we are leaning, the things that we are doing, and that's how our nefesh will affect us and our thought process, our desires, etc. So, just as an aside, before we continue on to the new material, this is something we've mentioned in the past, but I think this is a good place to mention it as well. It is clear from here that when a person is asking Hashem for different things, we should be asking for this kind of spiritual guidance as well. Meaning, we can ask for Hashem to help us influence ourselves, essentially. We can ask that Hashem give us more of this, or perhaps we should be more in tune with what our neshama is trying to tell us. And we should use that as a way to grow. Don't think that you can just do it on your own. These are things you need help with. You need help. If you look at if you've never done your taxes before and you open up TurboTax, you're going to be lost, right? You need a little bit of help. So when it's time to grow, which is all the time, you need to ask for help. And this is something you can ask for, because every time we do something right, if we are in touch with our nefesh a little bit more, it'll help influence us to continue on that path. And that's something we can ask for, and we should ask for. So as we see over here, that the nefesh is able to kind of implant thoughts in our heads. If someone's having trouble with a particular Yetzer Hara that they have, they need to ask Hashem for help and say, I don't want this Yetzer Hara anymore. I want to beat it. I want to be over it. Take these thoughts out of my mind. And sometimes Hashem will say, sure, no problem. That'll be enough. That's all it'll take. And all of a sudden, you'll find that it's much easier. The temptation is disappearing. It's dissipating, right? So these things can happen. They can work. You need to ask. Don't expect it to just happen on its own. So don't think that your thoughts and your desires and these things are just like, they're just programmed into you, and this is just who you are. This is just how you work. It's not that way. It's not at all. These are messages that come from a much higher source, and obviously you can ask Hashem to help you adjust that to your liking. Yes?
So specifically, the tefillah is the positive or the positive and the negative? Are we asking for clarity spiritual clarity, or do we also have to ask for spiritual
There's
clarity?
nothing you can't
plus-
ask for. Everything.
Plus getting those nasty thoughts out of my mind.
Everything. Ask for everything.
No, but is there a way to do it that's
No.
the proper way?
The proper way is to keep asking. Or Shiva told us many times, says, don't be a nudge, but to Hashem you can be a nudge. Don't worry about it. Keep asking. Keep asking. Yes.
Would, besides Shema Kohen, would Ataf Kohen be a good place to have that kavanah?
There's no bad place. Atach is a good place. Atach Kadosh is a good place. Hashishenu is a good place. Slach Lanu is a good place. I mean, there's no bad. Really, the real answer is that Re'ei Nava Anyenu is the place. That's actually the most appropriate place. That's in Shemona Esrei, the bracha, which is the little word on top that they put here is redemption. But the commentaries describe that this is not talking about physical redemption; it's talking about our internal struggles. But there's no bad place. They're all good places.
I think Rabbi Nachman in the end, that's from the Baal Shem Tov, if I remember reading it correctly, talks about his Todavus, where you talk to Hashem in your own language, your mother tongue. You don't have to, the Hebrew you may not have a command of, and you may not really understand all the words they're saying. And just talk to Hashem in your mind, in your own language, and speak to him, like you said, like talk to him like he's your therapist. Like, I need help, please help me, this is what's going on. And that's the Hizbah, you know,
Anytime.
Yeah.
anytime.
No doubt.
You could just be driving in your car and do Hizbah.
That's right.
I mean, you could do
I would recommend focusing on the road. But
some people can multitask.
and some people get into accidents when they think they can multitask.
But the good thing is it's going on in your head. You're not looking on the screen of your phone. So it's
That's
not texting. It's like
Definitely don't text when you're driving.
Sometimes
It comes to Starbucks, driving with your knees.
That's right.
I don't know. Like,
Text
sometimes
Hashem?
you could just, yeah,
Anyone have Hashem in their text in their contacts list?
I don't even have to have my hands on
He's my Uber driver.
Star 613.
That's good. I like that.
He's my Uber driver.
There you go.
Gosh.
That's great.
I actually met a guy whose name was Hashem.
Yeah.
Uh-uh.
Yeah.
Yes, in Toledo, Ohio.
Nice.
Somebody, he owned a plant that was made of Middle Eastern different things, and like hummus and stuff, and it's about a Starcade. So we went to get some hummus, like a big container, and the Shiva said, okay, and I'd like to introduce you. This is, Yaakov Goldman, and he's like, I'm Hashem. I'm like, come again?
At a gas station.
So he didn't want to ruin it for me. He's like, yes, you just met Hashem. That's good.
Gas station had its name, that bad, his name was Hashem, yeah, Hashem.
That's right. That's right. Doc, do you have something to say, or you're just trying to show your face?
In the on page 185 on the book that I have, there's the line that says, "It is the divine soul which is supposed to control man." Do you have that in your book?
Yeah.
It has that phrase. So it says, it does rest upon the man himself whether his soul will partake of the perfection that God desires for it, or be distanced from that perfection. And then the next sentence is, it is the divine soul which is supposed to control man. And then it goes on with the other things you mentioned. I'm just trying to understand that
Okay,
phrasing.
so
It is the
that
divine
point.
soul which is to control man.
So that point is a switch. When the first part of that paragraph, it was talking about how we influence our nefesh, and then that line is where he starts talking about how the nefesh influences us.
Right. I took it that way. It just seemed very strong with the phrase, it is the divine soul which is supposed to control man. It seemed like there's something more to that.
Well, I don't agree with that translation, personally. That's not a direct translation of the words. The words in Hebrew are, V'hi pa'eles ba'adam, is that it acts upon man. It does. The supposed to is something that was inserted by whoever wrote that translation. I don't agree with that interpretation either, personally. I don't think that's what's going on here. I think he's stating a fact. He's saying that this is what happens. The nefesh is what implants certain thoughts and desires into our hearts and minds, and it's through that we do what we do.
I'm not reading that as a negative.
He is.
I know he is, but it's just that I think he's getting hung up on the word supposed to.
Right, I don't think the word supposed to should be
Yeah,
there.
I
don't think it's supposed
yeah.
to be there. Oh no.
It's basically like
Yes?
I wasn't suggesting it was something negative.
oh.
Good. All right.
My
Yes.
question would be, why do they use the word nefesh as opposed to neshama? Because didn't we say earlier that nefesh is actually the primitive animalistic instincts that we're working through our nefesh behaviorally, but really the drives come from more of I guess the neshama aspect. And if he's using the word divine soul, and we're talking about our thoughts, wouldn't it be better to have used the word neshama rather than nefesh?
Okay. So at this point, he hasn't introduced the neshama yet. The construct is that the nefesh is made of different levels, the lowest level of which connects to the nefesh abahami, which is the force of life that's found within all of life in the world, all the animal kingdom as well. And it's the lowest level of the nefesh that connects to that, and that connects to the blood. But within this nefesh, there's a higher and a lower, and the higher is what we call the neshama. But it's all part of the nefesh.
Correct. So this would be the neshama level inside the nefesh.
Well, it starts there, but it actually is within the entirety of the nefesh that these messages and things happen. They go throughout. Yes.
You say that when it says it's supposed to, it's talking about, after the faith of Adam Rishon, that ideally, before the faith, we were in the nefesh, and what would happen when the Mashiach comes up, the nefesh will have more direct influence on the body. It's supposed to have, elevate and be much easier, and that was the ideal, and maybe that's where we're coming into, or.
I have no reason to think that's what he's talking about here. I mean, that would be taking it entirely out of context.
Yeah, it'd be out of context.
Yeah, I have no reason to think that's what's going on over here.
Why do you have that look on your face?
Because I didn't realize interrupting class.
Well, please, by all means. How can we help you? You looking for anyone in particular?
No, just
Oh, okay.
There's plenty of those here.
We've got a few in the back. Okay.
And on the benches.
Yeah, that's right.
Pretty much everywhere.
All right. Are we good here?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Well, no.
Wait, is that water?
Yeah, you guys are
I
getting
just
slack.
drink. Anytime I hear a word, I just drink.
Alcoholic beverage.
That's right.
There's-
Af al pi shekranua al derech klal nefesh achas. So even though we have been describing this in a general sense as a single entity called the nefesh, hine be'emes, the truth is, hi ba'alas chalakim rabim. This is something which is actually made up of many parts, and lots of different levels. And we can really describe it as saying, it's like having many different nefesh, plural, nefeshes, also known as nefashos in Hebrew, that are intertwined, they're interconnected, kitab ais hashalshelis, like the rings of a chain. Okay? So a chain is that every ring is its own entity, but since they are interconnected, they create a bigger entity. But each ring remains with its own identity, it remains with its own properties, but it contributes through its connection to the next link in that chain. So over here, when you're dealing with the different aspects of the nefesh, each one is higher than the next one, which is lower, until eventually you get down to the physical. But each one is on its own level. So you just picture that chain and how everything is transmitted from the first link down to the bottom link.
So it's a chain like this as opposed to...
Straight down. Just straight down, like a chain hanging. Straight down.
But they're interlinked.
Well, because each level is connected to the level below it. It's not that the top level is connected to the bottom level. The top level is connected to the second level. And the second is connected to the third.
So it's like the ladder.
It's more like a ladder. The point he wants to bring here is that each but the picture he's trying to draw here is how each link has its own power, and that influences just the link under it. And which you don't really have that parable with a ladder so well. The whole idea here is that each one's connected to the one below it, which is connected to the one below it, so everything kind of gets filtered as it goes down from one to the next. Okay. And the same way a chain is made to accomplish what it needs to accomplish, and it's made to do that as it does, so too, all these different levels of the nefesh, they combined create and build this upper soul, this nefesh that we've been describing. It's made up of all of these different parts. And each one is connected and tied to the one below it. And the last one is the last one of the upper nefesh is connected to the lower nefesh, which is the one shared by all living creatures. And that last one, that bottom one that's under the last of the higher ones, that one is connected to the blood, as we have described earlier. Okay? Are we understanding this? So pretty
Connected to what?
to the blood.
Oh, okay. So, got it. Okay. Never mind. I see it.
Okay, good?
Yeah. So does that mean different tiers of the chain? Or
Each
literally?
link is its own level.
Okay.
Okay. Now, he does mention in some of his other works that I believe he says it can have up to like 600 parts. You know, there's no, it's not a physical thing. There's no limitation to how many, but I think he says somewhere he mentions the number 600. You know, but yeah, there's no, we shouldn't think of it as just, you have your nefesh, and that's it. Like, don't picture it like that. There's a lot of parts and pieces. It's a very complex piece of spiritual machinery.
It almost seems like it's really hard to distinguish where the two
The upper and lower?
Yeah, where they separate.
Okay, so basically the difference is between an animal and a man. That's where you'll notice the difference.
Right, but I'm saying like to actually like where that delineation is seems like a little.
Well, one is almost tangible in the sense that it's almost recognizable by science, like that science can create life, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's kind of the almost, that's the lower nefesh. That's the more physical nefesh, as opposed to the spiritual, which is obviously undetectable by mankind. Yes?
When it says it's connected to the blood, is that where maybe one of the reasons why this Rifas Adam, we have the blood's part of the avoda and the carbon, that it has that connection to the...
Very much so, yes. Yeah. The Pasuk says, Ki Adam hu nefesh, that the blood is the nefesh. And that's why we're not allowed to eat blood, because that is the nefesh.
Does this exclude, and this may be an odd question, does this exclude like parameciums and amoebas and bacteria, which are still living, but it doesn't necessarily have blood? The animals have blood, but parameciums and amoebas and bacteria, it's still some sort of...
Yeah, I don't know. Don't know.
How are all these parts, like, what are all these parts, and do we all have the same parts?
No, we definitely all have different parts. And the idea, these are different elements of the makeup of a person. So a nefesh, for example, you have one nefesh that lived a lifetime and it needed to develop more tzedakah, let's say. So Hashem might take a piece of that, the tzedakah part that's a little bit lacking, and stick it into someone else who is going to live 1,000 years later, who's going to have a challenge with tzedakah. And if they win that challenge and they succeed, then that nefesh can now go back to where it came from, whole and complete, and now that's perfected. Sometimes we're just made of just a conglomeration of all sorts of different parts and pieces, and Hashem gives us a very unique life that's there to fulfill all those different needs. That, all the different things we need to accomplish within all these different parts and pieces, our life is designed to give us opportunities for all those different things. So that's how it works. So don't ever think for a second that something happens is just by chance. Of course not. Everything that happens to us is because there's something within us that needs rectification. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to win those challenges and make the necessary corrections. That's what we're here for.
So the 7 parts of the soul that I learned about.
What 7 did you learn about?
Well, there's like one.
Go ahead.
there's like one part that is, hovers over the body always. And there's a part that's.
There's 5. You're talking about 5 part. I don't know 7.
So then 5.
But yeah, so we'll get there. We'll get to the 5 if we continue learning.
Let us continue.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the 5. Yeah, we'll get there. Okay. All right, so let's continue. Ukvar Efsher, and it is possible. It's possible that some of these parts leave at certain times. One day you might wake up missing some of your nefesh, which is fine. Maybe they'll come back later when they've got something else to accomplish, perhaps. Or perhaps you'll get more than you started with. One day all of a sudden you're up 20 parts. Never know. And after a certain amount of time, with a certain amount of opportunity, they'll leave as well and go back to wherever they came from. Understand, you're not going to notice a difference physically at all in the person when this happens. Because all of the things that are accomplished, that happen through the nefesh on all the different levels, is not something that we feel. It's not something that we sense. They don't change the vitality of a person. They don't change the feeling of a person. Nothing changes that we can sense. It's just what they do. It's what a person is at their core, what a person's mission is, what their job is, what they need to do right then. That's what's affected by all these different parts and pieces. And remember, everything that happens down here comes from those upper roots, the spiritual roots in the upper world. And it needs to get down here through the nefesh. That's the chain. So different times there are different sharashim up there that need to have something happen to us, around us, with us, and we need to have a certain piece of nefesh that's the conduit to connect us to that. So that'll get installed, it's kind of like an adapter. You put in the right piece and now everything works, everything fits, it runs down the line. So there are times where we need to have certain pieces of nefesh put into us in order to allow for the sharashim, those roots, to act upon us in whatever it is that they need to do. Based on what is appropriate for them to be connected to. So now,
inspired or something. Otherwise, what's the point of doing that?
So there's two aspects. So first is that in order for the sharashim to make things happen to us, there has to be a connection. So he's saying over here that connection isn't just that it's not like we have a universal adapter nefesh, right? Every shirish up there has a certain route it needs to take, and in order for that to be compatible with us, we need to have a certain nefesh adapter, so to speak. And in order for that to happen, it needs to come through this, right? And there's also the idea that we need to have, when we experience certain things in life, we have opportunities. And sometimes those opportunities are things that we can accomplish based on the different pieces of nefesh that we might have. So following our example of tzedakah, if someone is going to have a challenge for tzedakah that day, they're going to get their 8th piece of mail asking for a donation for that day, right? And that's the 8th one's going to be the challenge because you already did the 7, and it's like enough already. And then you see, oh no, there's one more, right? So that challenge, though, carries with it the greatest opportunity for growth. So if the person has that opportunity, there might be a piece of a nefesh from their great-grandfather who needed a little bit of help with the tzedakah thing, and that'll get installed so that way when he makes this, decision, it's not only going to help his general nefesh, but it'll help that piece from his great-grandfather too. Right, it's opportunities that Hashem calculates everything to make sure that everybody, every neshama can get its tikkun, can get what it needs to do to be completed and perfected. And yes, like we said earlier, the nefesh is able to influence us. It gives us these thoughts, this inspiration, these different things that we do. It's able to get us in the mindset. It gives us that influence, that charge that we need sometimes to do the right thing.
So we're interconnected. I know that, like, if you make a donation and someone's on, like, in memory, like, on their yard site, it helps them. It helps. But what you're saying is that we're still interconnected with family members from long ago.
Not necessarily, but it's possible. I'm not saying it necessarily happens that way, but it is possible to happen that way. We don't know. That's what he's saying. He's saying here, we are not aware of when these things happen, the comings and goings. We don't know that. So, but just understand that can happen. That's his point. As I mentioned previously, the Magen Avram writes that every morning when we say our brachos, one of the brachos that we make is Shalai Yasani Goy. We thank Hashem for not making us a Gentile. And the Magen Avram says, why would you make that bracha every day? He says, because it happens every day. Because you could wake up one day with a non-Jewish neshama. And you're thanking Hashem for not having that happen to you.
How would you know?
Well, someone asked me that, and I said, my guess is that you probably wouldn't be saying that bracha. If you were at the point that you were getting a non-Jewish neshama, you probably weren't saying brachos every morning. That's my guess.
It sounds like an awful mix-up.
Yeah, it does, but it's not a mix-up. It's because if someone's acting in a certain way, it gets to a point where Hashem says, you're ruining it. Yeah. I'm taking this away from you. You're not being responsible.
And you would be the same person?
You would not feel it, you wouldn't know nothing. That's what we just said. You wouldn't know.
But that would be for somebody who's...
someone who eats bacon for breakfast might be getting themselves one of those neshamas. Yes. Yes.
Bringing just the concept of giggle, and it's hard for me to grasp, like, to try to sort of like, well, what is you? What is your neshama? Like, it's Chiyas Amesim, the neshama, like, who are you? It's very, just the fact of the giggle just makes it even more like, I can't grasp, like, try to understand what's
That's
going
fine.
on. I mean, what are your thoughts? Or it's really...
My thoughts are it's totally fine not to grasp that.
Okay.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of thing that is necessary to understand in order for us to grow. I don't think it's necessary to have a good grasp on it. I don't.
It takes you down a very scary...
Yeah, it's nothing. No good will come from understanding that.
Yeah.
You don't need that.
Let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that's going to create the...
All right. So he finishes this with saying, "V'hine mechlal zeh," based on this concept, hu inyan haneshama yisera sheba b'Shabbos kodesh. This is the idea of the neshama yisera, the extra neshama that we get on Shabbos. V'halachas ab matzah Shabbos, that leaves us after Shabbos. V'ein b'yasav v'lo yitzi yasin or goshim leguf. But its coming and going is not recognizable to us. It's not something we understand. It's not something we feel. Now, we might feel Shabbos, but we're not feeling the Neshama Yisera per se. We're not necessarily feeling it. Huh?
That's the carbs.
The carbs, that's right.
What do you mean? You don't feel anything on Shabbos.
That's right. Right, so that's this idea of the extra Neshama. What's it about? So it's not that a person has one Neshama, and then on Shabbos they get a second Neshama. That's not what it is. It's that there's another level that is an addendum. It's added on to our existing one every Shabbos. And we get the same one every Shabbos. It keeps coming back. And that is something that we can use to our advantage. It increases our capacity for spirituality on Shabbos that we don't have during the week, because we have this extra level of nefesh that comes and becomes part of our greater neshama, and that is what is being referred to. Yes?
So why do we have some in Havdalah?
The reason we have B'Samim and Havdalah is to console the weekday nefesh for its loss of that extra part.
Right. So why? But if we don't feel it, why does Chazal emphasize that for like?
Why? Okay, so smell is considered a sense that is the most spiritual of our senses. It's the closest to the spiritual nefesh, and it is untainted because it was the only sense that wasn't involved in the sin in the Garden of Eden. All the other senses were involved. That one was not, which kept it with a certain level of spiritual height that the other senses do not have. So when we smell, as much as we feel a physical sensation, there's also something more spiritual going on, which is why we specifically do that when we're losing our extra neshama. Okay? Okay, so that's the idea of the neshama shayr. Now, let me just mention here what he says on the bottom. He quotes from Rav Chaim Friedlander, which I had the Hebrew one here. I didn't bring it with me, though. I think he brings it here. Yes, here. He says, although Rashi says in the Gemara in Be'ah that the Neshama Yisera allows a person to eat and drink more than usual on Shabbos, that does not mean it is sensed by the body. Rather, the spiritual soul does not recoil from the physical food of Shabbos because it is not harmed by it due to the influence of the Neshama Yisera. So, let me just expound on this, because this is a very important concept. The entire week, when we eat, it can be one of two things. It can either be a spiritual pursuit, or it can be a physical pursuit. We can eat because we like the food. That's a physical pursuit. We can eat because we need to eat, we need to be healthy, we need to have energy to survive, to do mitzvahs, etc. That's a spiritual pursuit. Okay? Same action, just depends on what you're thinking. Now, when Shabbos comes, there's a concept that Shabbos is meant to be honored, and we're supposed to enjoy Shabbos. How do we enjoy Shabbos? Physically. We enjoy it with food and drink. Okay, now, what happens there is that we're taking the physical and we're making it spiritual. Now, under normal circumstances, the way people picture that is that when I eat something in honor of Shabbos, I should say, the Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, this I'm eating in honor of Shabbos, right? And that way I'm taking what would otherwise be a very physical pursuit of eating a piece of challah, which I enjoy a lot, and instead I'm making it a spiritual thing because I'm saying it's in honor of Shabbos, right? So the Kotzker Rebbe was famously sitting with his students, and each one would take a bite and he'd say, L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh. The next one, L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, right? And then it was the Rebbe's turn, he ate last, and he said, L'Kavod Mein Baich, in honor of my stomach. Right? And everybody laughed, right? It sounds funny, right? But the truth is, there's a tremendous amount of depth in that. Because what he was saying is that if you eat to enjoy on Shabbos, that itself is a spiritual pursuit. Just the fact that you're enjoying yourself physically on Shabbos, that itself is a spiritual pursuit. Shabbos transforms because Hashem says, on this day, I want you to enjoy yourself physically. That's not true the rest of the week. But on Shabbos, Hashem says, I want you to enjoy yourself physically. That is part of the honor and delight of Shabbos. And therefore, if you eat because the food's good, that itself is the mitzvah of Shabbos. So you don't have to be thinking, this is an honor of Shabbos. The fact that you're enjoying yourself on the Shabbos is the honor of Shabbos. So that's kind of what's going on over here too. What Rav Chaim Friedlander is saying is that when a person has this extra nefesh on Shabbos...
Kind of ironic, the day that shows that Hashem created the world, you're supposed to indulge, so to speak, more in physical.
Well, it's not more in physical. It's that indulging in physical is a mitzvah then, which it's not the rest of the week. The Yerushalmi says that when the Neshama Yisera goes back up after Shabbos, they ask it three things. They say, what food did they give you? What drink did they give you? And what Torah did they give you? So you need it both. It's the capacity of the person is changed entirely for Shabbos. So let me finish my thought here. So what Reb Chaim is saying is that when a person has this neshama yisera, what it does is that it allows the regular nefesh that you normally have not to be repulsed by the food. What does that mean? Because normally, if a person's eating just because they like food, your nefesh doesn't like that. That's a physical pursuit. That's the opposite of what your nefesh wants. Your nefesh wants spiritual pursuits. But when Shabbos comes, this extra level, the neshama yisera, what it does is, it says, no, eat regular, eat because you enjoy. And that is going to be what feeds this extra neshama, because that is what the mitzvah of Shabbos is. Enjoy yourself physically, and that's why the regular nefesh isn't repulsed by it, because now it automatically is a spiritual pursuit. So this accomplishes a lot. So that's how I believe that's what Reb Chaim Friedlander is coming to say. Yes?
So obviously that would pertain to Yontif, but we don't have a neshama yisera. So I guess it's a two-part question. Why don't we have a neshama yisera on Yontif? And how does that work, with as far as obviously Sudas mitzvah is for Yontif, it's that same thing. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's a
How is Shabbos and Yontif differently? Meaning, how does the mitzvah to eat on Yontif, there's a mitzvah of Simcha on Yontif, which is different than the mitzvah of Einig, which is on Shabbos.
And why don't we have a neshama yisera on Yontif?
Why isn't there a neshama yisera on Yontif? Okay, so I'm not fully prepared to answer that question, but on a very basic level, what I will say is that the mitzvah of Simcha, which is specific to Yontif, not to Shabbos, is a very different kind of mitzvah than the mitzvah of Einig. Einig means to delight, means to take pleasure in. Simcha is joy. Joy is something that's different than pleasure. And that's where Shabbos and Yontif diverge. And that's why Shabbos has an neshama yisera, because it's about pleasure, which is different than joy, which is related to Yontif specifically. It's all about simcha. And that simcha is related directly to karbanos. In simcha l'biyayin and simcha l'babasar, it's directly related to the karbanos, because you have a mitzvah to bring karbanos and eat them on Yontif, which is not true of Shabbos. So they're very much divergent. So I'm not giving you a full answer, but that's where it starts.
Yom Kippur?
Yom Kippur, we don't eat.
But it's Shabbat Shabbaton.
Yes. So Yom Kippur has an extra level, which is above eating.
Right, but
yes, it's a higher level than that.
Does Neshama Yisera come back for?
Is there Neshama Yisera on Yom Kippur? I don't believe so. But I don't know that. But I don't know that. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
What about when it's...
But there's no mitzvah owning.
Right.
When Shabbos and Yontif overlap,
Mm-hmm.
then we have...
Both. And you have the Neshama Yisera.
The most amount of...
all sorts of stuff. Yes. Shabbos and Yontif. Yes, and because Yontif is so powerful also in that regard, when the second day of Yontif, or the first day of Yontif is after Shabbos, when we make Havdalah, we don't smell the Basam. Because you don't need it. Because you have the Yontif to take the place of it.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I'm gonna open up a can of worms here probably. I've been trying to formulate this question for the last 10 minutes or so since we've been talking about this. But
thanks for staying with us.
Okay. So, we talk about taking in the physical pleasure of food and drink on Shabbos. But if we're not inclined to do that, if that's just not a natural, I'll just be honest, that for me, eating more, I just don't, I just don't, it's just my nature, right?
Right.
So there are other things that I feel get nurtured during that time, or that where I'll get inspiration or whatever else, but it's usually something creative.
Okay.
And so I wonder if there's a possibility that we're getting that kind of extra in. Is it just food and drink, or can it be other things? Which also creates, by the way, a really difficult conundrum, because if I want to create, but it's Shabbos, I can't create. But that's when that's when my creativity happens. It's really annoying. It's really annoying.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's because I stop and I'm like, oh, well, I'm not working. Like, what can I do?
Right, because it's the first time you get to stop and think all week.
Right, and then I'm like, oh, I could just go make this. Well, no, I can't. And then it.
Right.
And I've seen this happen with other people where it will basically create like Shabbos becomes almost like a prison.
Right.
Right.
Yes, it does.
So what I'm wondering, I guess, in this like very circular question, I'm not even sure if it's a question, like, is it always just a food and drink kind of thing,
No.
or is it like
no, it's not.
Where else can we?
Okay, so let me just start off with the fact that the halacha is that if a person finds more pleasure in fasting, then they are to fast on Shabbos, and that is the fulfillment of this. It's about pleasure. It's not about food and drink specifically. Gotcha. Okay. Food and drink are just kind of the standard example because we're human beings. But for those of us who are obviously a higher level than that, and I'm kidding. Don't worry. I'm kidding. Don't worry. It's just, right, but it's not limited to food and drink. No, it's whatever it is. So, for example, as Shabbos goes on, the kedusha, the holiness of Shabbos increases, and there are those who hold that the third meal, the shalosh shudas, which is considered the highest level of all the 3 Shabbos meals, you can fulfill with learning Torah, not eating a morsel of food. Why? Because when you're on that level and you've had already a whole Shabbos behind you, now you can have that same spirit fulfillment in a spiritual way without having anything physical at all. So absolutely, it's not limited. It's not limited. Now, if it becomes a jail, that's because you're misunderstanding the concept of holiness. That's the problem. The problem is that you're thinking mundane thoughts. You can have creativity in spiritual things instead of mundane things. That's just a shift that needs to happen. Which won't just happen on Shabbos. It has to happen in general, and then Shabbos will follow suit. But that's where it happens. Yes, the fact that you have time to sit and think is a gift. And the problem is that if our minds are at 98% physical all week long, when Shabbos comes, where do you think it's going to go? Right? Yeah. It's going to stay in the physical things. If we're working on including more spirituality into our weeks, then our minds won't be so one-sided on the physical side, and they can start being creative on the spiritual side. So in the great yeshivas in Europe, and even in early years in America, the Rosh Hashiva would give his classes almost exclusively on Shabbos. That's when they would give their classes. They would also sometimes give during the week, but Shabbos was a given, because Shabbos is when people have a greater capacity.
So with the creativity that are and this is the hard part, because then I can't write it down, and then I forget. Sunday morning comes and I'm like, what was that again? It might be the ADHD, but I think that, and this is not necessarily something that has to happen right now, but like that thought process of like what is considered spiritual creativity, because when I get into this kind of stuff, like it requires a lot of thought. By Shabbos, I'm like done thinking. If that makes any sense, like so it's hard for me to sit down and like learn, because like I just, my brain just
take a nap. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know. I take a nap. Trust me.
That's part of your own Shabbos.
And for me, I would say it's a huge mitzvah because I sleep for a very long time.
Yeah, this is great.
But
this is great.
Yeah, which is awesome.
But yeah, it does. There is definitely some mental training that needs to go on to get your mind to go in the right direction. Yes. For sure.
So that it's. I like the idea of it not being just about physical food and drink, because
it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Cool. Glad we got.
All right. Thank y'all for coming.
So we are stopping in the middle of 187.
Yeah, because the next line, it really is the beginning. It's an introduction to the coming part. So we'll do that later.
You have to start with the right things. In other words, there is a change.
Right. So, but it's interesting because, like, if I write it here, like, I'm trying to